Have you ever thought, is this just me when struggling to stay organized, start tasks, or manage time? For those of us over 50, these challenges might not be just aging. They could be ADHD hiding in plain sight for decades. I'm Jami Shapiro, host of Grandma Has ADHD, and I'm building a community where your experiences matter. Whether you're diagnosed, questioning, or simply curious, you're not alone. Our Facebook group is filled with vibrant, understanding people over 50 who share their stories, strategies, and yes, even their struggles, with plenty of laughter along the way. Ready to find your people? Join our growing Grandma Has ADHD Facebook community. Please like and subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen and share it with someone who might need to hear they're not alone, because ADHD doesn't have an age limit and neither does understanding yourself better. Together, we're changing the conversation about ADHD after 50. Come be part of the story. Welcome to the latest edition of Grandma Has ADHD. I am so very excited to be joined by Scott Mendell, who is neither a grandmother nor a woman, who is the founder and managing partner at Red Bear Care in Houston, Texas. I'm going to let him tell you a little more about who he is, but I want to share what made me invite Scott to the podcast. So Scott and I recently met at the Certified Senior Advisor course to take the examination for certification, and everybody in the room got to introduce themselves and why we were pursuing our Certified Senior Advisor designation. And when you have ADHD, you don't often remember things that are said, but the way that Scott said what he said was completely touched me. But I also, when he spoke his truth, I was like, that man has ADHD. And that was confirmed. So basically, I'm going to let Scott do the majority of his introduction, but Scott's mission is to revolutionize healthcare or care for seniors. So Scott, I'm sure I butchered it. So if you would just come on to the Grandma Has ADHD stage and do a better job than I just did.
No, you did a great job, actually. You got the word right. We had that discussion there. Yes, revolutionize senior care in America.
Okay.
After taking care of my dad for 10 years, for the last two, 24/7, 365.
Wow.
He had a very rare condition, which we finally found out about right before he died, called progressive supranuclear palsy, a non-Parkinsonian disease, but it mimics Parkinson's. So he was misdiagnosed for years, and taking care of him, all I wanted to do was keep him healthy, keep him independent, because we all know that our parents' independence is our independence.
Absolutely.
So when he first started needing more and more help, I could see it becoming a need that I would have to face at some point, where either I would have a lot of help or I would quit working and take care of him myself. Well, as does everybody in the first, I decided to do it by myself. The first few years, it wasn't bad.
Well, I'm going to interrupt you. I would say most people don't think that they can quit their work to take full care of their parents. So,
And you're right. Fortunately, when I decided to quit was right in the middle of the pandemic.
Got it.
And so it gave me the opportunity. I'd been in real estate for 20 years. I was tired of it anyway. I was tired of dealing with the unethical, untrained agents, which seem to vastly outnumber the really good agents these days. And I'd had it. And Dad needed all of my help. And since we were in lockdown and I really couldn't do any kind of work anyway, I decided that was when I would quit and start taking care of my dad full time. Fortunately, I had the resources to do that.
That is fortunate. Unfortunately, most people don't have those resources. So I don't want anybody to feel shamed if they can't quit their job because they have to put food on the table.
I'm going to tell you right now, my doing it by myself was the biggest mistake I ever made. At the beginning, like I said, it wasn't difficult to do it because he didn't need me constantly. He could still ambulate, walk around the house, prepare his own sandwiches, sit down, turn on, turn off the TV. And for the most part, could still shower. And granted, not often enough for my taste, but he could still do it once a week or so.
Let me ask you, I'm going to pause for a minute because I'm going to interject some ADHD. I know you have ADHD, and as you know, it's heritable. Was your father the parent that had ADHD?
Don't think so.
Okay.
My dad was an engineer, extremely organized, very organized mind. I never saw anything that I would call ADHD in him because he just, I never saw him bounce from project to project. He was very focused where, you and I, if it's not completely absorbing, we'll be off of it and chase that squirrel that pops up next.
Right. I asked you that because some people with ADHD do struggle with hygiene, but it can also be seniors that struggle with hygiene who don't have ADHD because, it just takes so much for them to shower and do the things. Right. Exactly.
I think that was part of it with my dad was the energy part. I also think he was worried about falling in the shower. Sure. I think that was another thing that kept him was just that fear factor that kept him from.
Did he communicate that with you so that you could step in and help him, or
of course
he did not?
No, 1937. He was a 1937's man's man. Any kind of emotion was a weakness. Admitting a fear was absolutely forbidden. So trying to figure out what Dad needed, he hated doctors, which is probably why he's not here now. If he'd taken care of himself, he probably would have lived to be 100.
So I know you should never distract somebody with ADHD and when they're mid-sentence. Yeah. But you were saying that caring for him full time was a mistake. That was sort of where we went.
Yeah. So watching Dad, fortunately, I do have a biomedical science degree. And so I knew a lot about what he needed. I unfortunately knew more than a couple of his doctors did. That drove me a little crazy. But when I started doing the caretaking, it was all good. I would have to make sure that I was home or available any time of day. I put cameras up in the house so that I could watch and see if he fell, which he did on occasion. And for the beginning, he was perfectly capable of getting up himself. And by the time it started getting bad, he couldn't help himself up off the floor. And of course, he would resist calling me for hours. So hence the cameras, because if I saw him go down, I could start heading that direction and get him back up and get him into a chair and get him comfortable. But when he did go down and become that 24/7 care, I tried to do it myself. And I did it for, May, June, July, August. I did it for 4 months. Well, half of April, 4.5 months. And the last 2.5 weeks, he woke me up so many times that I was getting about a total of 30 hours of sleep in that 2.5 weeks.
Wow.
Because he would fall constantly, or he would get stuck and couldn't stand up. Or, it wouldn't matter what it was. He was constantly calling me at night. And thank God he knew the Hey Siri thing, because that's funny. I said, Hey Siri, my phone rang.
I was like, you're supposed to have the do not disturb on, but okay, that's forgiven.
Yeah. I didn't expect a call. I actually told the person that's calling me I would be on a call until about 4:00. So with Dad, it was calling me constantly, needing me. I mean, I did not sign up when I was born to change my dad's diapers. So and he didn't enjoy it any more than I did. I'm certain of that. But in the end, I ended up having a full-blown nervous breakdown. He said one wrong thing one day, and I almost killed my father. I broke. We got into a scram. I mean, we're both redheads. We have that beautiful Irish temper. And so I exploded. And
well, you also have ADHD, which can lead to emotional dysregulation. And I'm definitely going to go back to what you're going to do to revolutionize senior care. But I want to talk a little bit about your ADHD because, that's also part of this conversation. So tell me your ADHD backstory.
So didn't even realize I had it until this summer, as a matter of last summer.
Okay. Now, can I ask your age? Is that given that where 61. This is, you're 61?
Nope. Yeah, I'm a guy, so I don't care.
Okay, good. Well, no, because really this is geared to people 50 and over. And as we learned in the CSA class, the average age that somebody becomes a grandparent is 50, which is funny
Yeah.
because I had actually geared the conversation to 50 and over. I am 55. I don't have grandchildren. But really, once you hit 50, ADHD is largely ignored. And that was really why I picked that as the age. Okay, so I interrupted you. You just discovered this 2 years ago. So tell me
Not
how
even
that.
2 years ago. I discovered it like 8 months ago.
Okay, so how did you discover it?
Well, I mentioned I know a guy named Dr. Andy Lee. He is
Mm-hmm.
from Australia. And we met at a business coaching event, oddly enough, in Bali. And it's a very high level coaching deal. It's unbelievably intense. But at the time, we became friends. And at that point, he knew and I didn't. And then we saw each other again in November. And he was up on stage speaking. And he's a holistic MD. And he has like the worst case of ADHD. I mean, the guy bounces off the walls like a Super Bowl. And so he was speaking on ADHD because he just wrote a book on it and how he helped cure his ADHD and has worked with several other patients to get rid of theirs, or at least manage it.
Okay,
And
I was like, I don't think it can be cured, but I know it can be managed.
Yeah, manage it.
Okay.
And so he put a slide up on the screen that had all these things that might fit you if you have ADHD. And I was looking at it going, and it's like, are there more than 10 unread emails in your inbox? And I'm like, yeah, mine's
What?
10,000.
Mine's over 30,000, Scott.
Yeah. And I didn't even give you the real number. I'm approaching 6 digits.
Okay.
But I was looking at this going, yep. Oh God, yes. Yep.
All right.
Maybe
So let
not.
me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Do you wish that he had said something to you sooner?
I've always thought I was probably ADHD. I don't know that it would have made a difference in my life. Most of the real high-level entrepreneurs that I know are ADHD.
No, they think they think almost 50% of entrepreneurs are ADHD. So
I would bet it's higher than that.
And I've heard that too.
Yeah, because every one of them that I know, and everybody I was sitting next to in this conference, this business conference, was like, "Yep, I've got it."
We had 18 people in our CSA class, and there were at least 5 people in the room that had ADHD.
Absolutely. And probably more that didn't even realize that they had it.
Correct. So what were some of the other things that you're like, yep, check that one.
Oh, I wish I could remember. And I've asked him to send me the slide so that I can share it with you.
Okay.
But I don't have it yet.
That's okay. But if you want to go back to childhood and now that you know you have ADHD, what can you see that you maybe did that you now realize was ADHD?
That's a really good question. Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, it was like sports were my thing, but like homework and stuff like that, oh, absolutely not. Couldn't concentrate. If it was something I didn't enjoy, and even to this day, if I don't enjoy anything, the brain goes off. Like I'll be reading the page, my eyes are moving, the brain's off doing something completely different.
Yes.
Which I think was actually one of those things on the slide.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, although I was an AB student, studying was always a challenge. Fortunately, I'm smart enough that when I sit in class, I can get pretty good grades just by paying attention.
Have you ever heard the expression twice exceptional?
No.
So they say 50% of gifted children have ADHD. So because we tend to be bright, we are able to compensate. And for me, I would wait till the last minute to do my homework. Like I would literally do it the class, so that I needed that adrenaline to get the class done.
Cram and purge.
There you go. Oh yeah, forget it. You cram for it and then you forget it. Exactly. I had a question. You know how you have that question on the tip of your tongue and then you're like, oh, and I think that's an ADHD moment.
Or a senior moment.
Yes, it could be both. Absolutely. Okay, so how has your life changed since you have discovered that you have ADHD?
It hasn't, not at all, because I'm waiting for Andy's book to come out. Because unlike so many people, I'm one of these guys, I don't really like accepting free things. He's like, oh man, I'll send you a rough copy. I'm like, no. I want to pay for it. I want you've worked hard on this for years. You deserve my purchasing your product. And if it's great, I'll be happy to give it to everybody I know.
So you wouldn't say that anything has changed. Okay, let me ask you this question. We just got through an exam. Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know about you. It was the first exam that I have taken since discovering like the whole Scantron olden days exam, 115 timed questions where you give everything away. You can't have your phone. You can't have your computer.
Yeah, it really felt like I was back in high school.
It did. How did you study? Did you feel that you studied differently for this or prepared differently for this than you did before you knew you had ADHD?
No, because you said twice gifted a little while ago. I have always been a master test taker when it comes to the fill in the bubble tests.
Oh, not me.
I was in the top like 93rd percentile on the SAT. I was in the 90th percentile on the GMAT. And I did this the same way I did those. I just did practice questions. And oddly enough, several of the practice questions I did were actually on the test. I shared the one website with you that I found. And then that night, I blew through that one in no time at all. And I was like, God, I don't want to do the same one over again. I've already done the study guide. I've already done this one. So I Googled it again, and I found another one that had 265 questions. And if you paid, you could get 400. And I was thinking, okay, 265 will get me past bedtime. So I'll do it today, and then I'll finish it tomorrow. So that's all I did. I just did one practice.
So you didn't. Right. I changed my awareness of my having ADHD. I went and bought all the different colored highlighters and all the different colored pens and the colored note cards. And I
remember your note cards.
Yeah, I did that's right. I had them just before they took everything away from us. It was anything that I missed on the practice test. And then I got to like, my brain just couldn't absorb anymore. And I said, okay, I'm done. Okay. So I want to take a break, but when we come back, I want to talk about what you see in senior care that makes you say we need to revolutionize it. So we're going to take a moment to pause. And when we come back, we're going to complete that conversation. Ever wondered why helping a loved one declutter feels like speaking different languages? I did, especially with my mom. It wasn't until I founded Silver Linings Transitions, helping San Diego seniors organize and move for over a decade, that I discovered why. We all experience clutter differently, and for those of us with ADHD, it's a whole other world. If you are listening in the San Diego area and feeling stuck with moving, paperwork, photos, or home organization, our team at Silver Linings Transitions gets it. We understand ADHD's unique challenges, and we won't just help you get organized. We'll create sustainable systems that finally stick. Schedule a consultation with our team today at 760-522-1624. That's 760-522-1624, or find us at silverliningstransitions.com. So we are back with Scott Mendell, the founder and managing partner at Red Bear Care in Houston. And I left you with a cliffhanging question, which is, Scott mentioned that he wanted to revolutionize senior care. And I asked why, what made him make that statement, and how he is going to do it. So Scott, that's a big endeavor. And by the way, let me just say, after sitting through the classes and all that we learned, we need to revolutionize senior care and the way that not only the way that we care for seniors, but the way that we prepare to be seniors, which is part of my platform for people with ADHD, because we tend to have two times. We have now and not now. And so for a senior, if it's not in their immediate line of vision, they're not thinking about it and they're putting it off. And not for a senior, for someone with ADHD, we're putting things off. And we are going to one day be seniors if we're lucky. And we're going to have the double blessing of aging and ADHD. So Scott, take it away.
Double blessing. I like the way you put that. And I do love the title of your podcast, Grandma Has ADHD. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm going to touch on something now because you just said something that reminded me. One of my coaches, and I have like 8 different coaches for building this. And one of my coaches is a mindset coach. His name's Bobby Castro. He talks about non-refundable minutes. And you talk about a way for somebody with ADHD to kind of get a little bit of control is approach everything you do with the thought that the minutes you are going to spend on it are non-refundable. And to give you an example of failing to do that test, one of my superpowers, in fact, probably my best superpower, is problem solving. And when I'm given a problem, I will approach it with full gear, full intent, full blown force until I've got it fixed. So I was setting up a new phone system in our office to handle all the calls that we're going to be getting and something that matches up with our CRM. And two of my phones worked, and all of a sudden one of them didn't. I was like, what the? Okay. And so I got into it, started down the road of fixing it. And 9 hours later, and three service techs who finally we got one that knew how to go on the backside. When I told them it was actually their problem, not ours, because I could prove it. I had spent 9 hours to get one phone working. And I told Bobby, and he just shook his head and he goes, yeah. I said, I know, man, it's $450 an hour. And I could have bought 5 new phones for $1,000. So I wasted and he goes, for starters, with what you're building, you need to learn that it's not $450 an hour. You're worth about $400 a minute. And so every minute you burn, you're losing $400. So literally the 3 minutes you spent at the beginning of that, you could have bought your 3 new phones. And I was like, God, what a way to think.
Wow.
And I haven't gotten to a point where I've trained my brain yet to look at everything from that non-refundable minute stance. Like, is this the best and highest use of my minute right now? Like doing this with you is a great use of my minutes because it will touch so many people and help so many people. And that's my whole goal. So these are great minutes.
Well, I'm so glad that I'm worth $400 a minute.
Absolutely.
I've never been valued that high.
Yeah, I hadn't either till he said that. But I did have one of my other coaches when I first came up with this idea. I've got a coach named JT Fox, who is probably the top wealth coach in the world and the top branding coach. And I was telling him the idea, and I said, yeah, I think this can be like $1 billion business in about 10 years. And he goes, nah, you're wrong. And I was like, oh, man. And he goes, I said, multi-million-dollar business? He goes, nope, not even close. I was like, oh, come on. I know this is a good idea. He goes, yeah. He goes, this is a multi-billion-dollar business.
Wow. Okay. So tell me what you've got. What is it? What is it that you're doing? Okay.
So to revolutionize senior care, if you look at what's going on in America today, we've got 72 million people will be over the age of 65 in 5 years. 5 years. It's all of us baby boomers. And I'm one of the last 2 years that they kind of lumped in when they figured out they hadn't added us to a generation. But of that, according to the statistics, 70% of those people will need some form of care or assisted living before they die. That means 50 million people will be needing care or assisted living before they die. Right now, there are 3.85 million beds in America. Not enough, not even close to enough. Even if you add up all the caregivers that we've got, it's not enough. We cannot physically help all of these people. And when I was working with Dad, my whole goal was keeping him independent, keeping him walking, keeping him able to do the activities of daily life.
Right.
And unbeknownst to me, his slide was irreversible because of his disease.
Sure.
But I fought tooth and nail. I bought all the newest technological advances, all the stuff that helps with gait and balance and cognitive dexterity and digital dexterity. And I went down and kind of typical of ADHD people, once you latch onto something that's interesting, you don't let go any more than a bulldog will let go of a bone.
Yeah, your fixation.
Yeah. And so I deep dived and found myself looking at it from my real estate point of view first, which was as a real estate investor. And I looked at assisted living and I said, no, we can't do like normal facilities, right? And facility is a word I use very specifically. In my terms, it's almost like a racial slur, right?
Because yes, it's the F word.
Racial slurs always fit a particular group, no matter what the race. Facility fits a particular group of these assisted living, nursing home, skilled nursing facilities that are out there. And it's the worst of the worst.
Mm-hmm.
So I went from that into how do we make it more family-like with better care, like one caregiver per 5 seniors, not one for a floor of 100, where if you need help, it might not get to you for 2 or 3 hours. So I went and attended the Residential Assisted Living Academy and learned how to build this, although their approach is a little off. They, of course, because they're in the business, they're trying to make it seem a little bit rosier than it actually is. But if you approach it with where you do the higher end nutrition, the better care, the fewer number of seniors per caregiver, the better home, the nicer home, the more family-like, it's not as profitable as it is if you just go in and grab some 4-bedroom home and remodel it and put 8 people in it. And so because I wanted to build it with the idea that my dad would be in it or me, I wanted something really nice and something that would focus on wellness. So with most assisted living, when you walk through the door, they're like, "Oh, Miss Ellie, welcome to our home. We'll take care of you till you die." And that's not acceptable. Mm-hmm. To me, I wanted to say, "Miss Ellie, welcome to our home. We're going to do everything in our power to get you back to your family or your own home as soon as possible." Mm-hmm. And to do that, we kind of revolutionized, there's that word, the idea of what it meant to be in assisted living. And so I had to kill that term completely. So we aren't building assisted living. We're building wellness homes.
Wellness homes. Okay.
Wellness homes, because we want you to be well. That's kind of the mantra in my company is be well. Whoever walks through the door, whoever walks out the door, we greet each other, it's be well. And so that idea kind of morphed when I started really getting into this because I wanted to build a caregiver training facility. Because having dealt with caregivers with Dad, I realized that like real estate agents, lawyers, used car salesmen, most of them suck. And I don't know if I can say that on your podcast, but it's the best.
You can
word.
say suck.
And so I decided that we were going to train caregivers better than any training in the U.S. or the world right now. Currently, our training is about 10 days long. The only other one that I've heard of that comes close to that is 4 days. And so when ours come out, there will be part of the Red Bear Care Corps. And we're working on getting an accreditation set up to call them Care Corps certified. Both of those are trademarked already, by the way. Okay. And so I was talking with one company about their training and ended up buying part of that company so I could get their training material. Mm-hmm. And then we started adding to it and building on it until we got to where, and actually after our training we just went through, I'm adding several more sections to our training. And so next thing I know, I'm running a home care company because I was thinking about the idea of training caregivers and only needing, like 4 at a time and just releasing the rest out into the wild. And I thought, if we do this right and I send them out of our wellness home, like if they actually recover and can go live in their own home, we still have to support them. Mm-hmm. So all the caregiving that we were doing, all the PTOT, STBT that we were doing, physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy.
Thank you.
I'm including brain therapy because there's a lot of new technology that can do that. Then if we send them home and they don't get that continued care, they're going to bounce right back into our home. That's not what I want. Mm-hmm. So I had to establish a home care company and a home health company so that once they got back to their homes, we can support them. Mm-hmm. That led me down a rabbit hole, and I bought an office building to house my home care home health company.
Wow.
And the woman that was selling it, oddly enough, had Alzheimer's. And I was speaking with her daughter, and the real estate guy in me was like, "Hey, why are you selling this?" And she told me about her mom. And I was like, "You will not believe why I'm buying this." And she goes, "Oh my God, really?" And then she followed that with, "You need to open a daycare." And I was like, "No, I don't. I got enough on my plate."
But that's a typical, so ADHD that she would be like, "Okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to add this and I'm going to add that and I'm going to solve this problem." And you said, that you were a problem solver, by the way. And I don't know if you're aware that that's a very ADHD common trait. Okay. Again, because you're new to the conversation, and as are a lot of the people that are listening to this, because again, seniors have been largely undiagnosed. Okay, so I wanted, because I try to keep the podcasts short enough that we don't lose attention, but also
we're already 2 minutes over that.
Right, exactly. But so we have a couple of crises. We are not going to have enough caregivers for the people who are going to need the care, especially as I am a Gen Xer and our children, the Gen Zs, and so far the Gen Alphas, are not wanting to have children generally. Who knows what will end up happening? But, we don't have enough people to care for us. So what is it that we are going to need to do to care for ourselves as long as possible?
So it's like what I'm setting my whole company up to do now, right? So now we're daycare all the way through hospice. So
you are going to do the daycare. You'd said no. Okay.
I said
all
no,
right.
but went home that night, and it dawned on me that if I added daycare and hospice, I will create the first ever vertical integration of the entire senior life cycle. So for the first time ever, continuity of care will actually mean continuity of care. We'll be the same company with you from day one to the last day. We will be your family. And so for me, it was a challenge to solve that problem, right? How are we going to take care of our parents or ourselves? Well, the best thing to do is keep people alive and healthy longer, which is exactly the opposite of what the government wants right now. So to keep you and I healthy, we have to stick with the things that have been proven to work. Diet, exercise, mental stimulation, all of that stuff. Everything that I've researched in building this company has come down to those simple things. And don't stop. I have talked with so many seniors and celebrity seniors even. Joe Foster, the founder of Reebok, David Walker, the former comptroller of the United States, comptroller general of the United States, Tom Cruise, Tom Selleck, William Shatner. And all of my friends that are in their 80s. The gentleman in the office right above me right now is 88 years old and still works 12 hours a day, 6 days a week as an engineer.
Love it.
And every single one of them, when I ask the question, what's your secret? How do you do this at your age? Every one of them, without exception, says the same thing, maybe with different words, but it all boils down to what Joe Foster said, and I think he said it the best. Nobody ever told me to stop. He is 91 years old. He travels 7 months out of the year speaking on stages all over the world. And so all of them, the key is they never stopped working. Two of my friends, I just talked to him last night while I was on one of my rodeo shifts. He is 88. He still comes out and volunteers at the rodeo every year with me. His wife is 85 years old. Every Monday, she gets on a plane from Houston, flies to Cleveland, where she works for the company she's been with for 35 years. Her boss is 96 and still working.
Wow.
She's the bookkeeper there. She gets back on a plane on Thursday, flies home, and spends Thursday night through Monday morning with her husband. At 85 years old, she does this every single week. And they were the very first ones that I asked that question. I was like, how in the world do you do this? And they both still work. He works a 25-hour-a-week job with his volunteering, and she works 4 days a week in a different city.
That's amazing. That's probably also the secret to their marriage.
It is. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And plus, his name is Smiling Jack. He's one of the happiest people you'll ever see in your life.
Well, that attitude is, I'm such a big proponent of attitude. And I will say this about having ADHD, that there are so many setbacks, but one of the traits that I love is our resilience. And I think there's no coincidence in the fact that those of us with ADHD tend to be more resilient. So, Scott, who do you want to find you? How can we support you? I want, since this is $400 a minute, I want it to be well worth your time. So, bring us back.
Redbearcare.com is our website. And as we're building this beast, if you've got any research that I haven't mentioned here, if you've got ideas or technologies that will help our seniors, please reach out. You can find all my information, our contact on our website. info@redbearcare.com will always get to me. My direct is scott@redbearcare.com. That's the easy one.
With two T's.
Yes, 2 T's.
Okay, we'll put that in the show notes. And Scott, one thing I do hope is that you will be mindful now of the intersection of ADHD and seniors, because so many people are largely unaware. And as you're building this, that needs to be added to the conversation.
Yeah, and I think that'll be interesting, especially in our daycare. If we can see it early enough, and between you and Andy, and I'll send you his contact, it'll be interesting to try and do we're going to try and do a lot of studies, and ADHD may be one of them, to see what we can do to help our seniors that have that. So
I'm
you can
happy
be a
to,
huge part of that
right. I'm
conversation.
happy to be a resource for
Yeah.
you on that. So
Yeah.
is there
So
anything else that you are going to regret that you didn't say if we end this podcast now?
thank you. Thank you for having me on.
It was great. It was wonderful to meet you, and I love what you're saying. And you really are an example of helping make the rest of someone's life the best of their life. So, thank you for listening to this episode of Grandma Has ADHD. Thank you to Scott Mendell of Red Bear Care. And thanks for listening. Please like and subscribe to our podcast and join our Facebook community, Grandma Has ADHD. And you do not have to be a grandma. Thanks. The opinions expressed on Grandma Has ADHD podcast are those of our guests and hosts and are intended for informational and entertainment purposes only. This podcast does not provide medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The content discussed in this episode is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, mental health professional, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition or mental health concern. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. If you think you may have a medical emergency, call your doctor or emergency services immediately. The host, guests, and producers of Grandma Has ADHD do not assume any liability for the content of this podcast. Listen at your own discretion.